Hi guys, welcome to our latest podcast of Yarn and Black. Today I have a really great friend of mine coming in, Andrea Casey. Hi Andrea.
Hi AJ, how's things?
I'm fine, how are you? You're looking good.
Oh, thanks, I always do.
You scrub
Yeah,
up pretty well
going,
sometimes.
going good here, but been really busy for National Reconciliation Week.
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, just before we do start, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is, tell the listeners who you are and where you're from.
Yep. So I'm Andrea Casey. I'll give you my last name because, So I'm living in Sunbury. I was born in Melbourne, born in Footscray, brought up in Victoria, but my Aboriginal heritage comes from parts of Victoria and also Tasmania. That was an interesting learning. Yeah. So I'm about to turn 59. So I'm an old lady with 2 kids and 3 grandkids and 2 giant dogs and 2 cats and a husband and all the things.
Cool. So you've been doing a bit of traveling lately too, haven't you?
Well, yes, a little bit. And I tell you what, I'm off to New Zealand next month.
Oh, cool. What are you doing over there?
I'm going to be part of a Q&A panel for breast cancer trials.
Oh, nice.
So there's an Australian-New Zealand scientific meeting they have every year. And they've invited me along to speak about my breast cancer.
Yeah, because you're actually working at Peter Mac at the moment.
Yep.
But before that, you actually did have your own experience, which is obviously why they've come over. That.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. How old were you when this happened?
So I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 48, which is considered to be young. I actually finished all of my treatment 10 years ago in May, so that was nice. I had a mammogram through breast screen in the January and everything was fine, but in the August I knew something wasn't quite right, so I followed it up. Yeah. And having a very strong family history of breast cancer, I don't play games with that stuff.
How did you know there was something up? Did you feel something?
I felt lumpy, but interestingly, that wasn't what the issue was. When they did the imaging, they found it elsewhere.
Oh.
So I think it was just a bit of intuition, perhaps. That old thing, listen to your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite a roller coaster there. It was like, oh yes, there's something, come back for a biopsy. And the next week I went back, oh no, there's nothing, don't worry about it. And then a month later, my GP, who was all over it, said, let's get you checked again just to be sure.
Yeah.
Because of the family history. And that's when they said, yeah, it is actually still there. Don't know what happened that other time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you found out you had cancer?
Yeah, it was a bit surreal. And I was playing it down a lot because my daughter had just moved to Cairns and I didn't want to worry her. And I didn't want anyone to worry about me. So I pretended that I was okay. And I just went along with pretty much everything the doctors wanted me to do. I sort of left it in their hands, figuring they were the experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your treatment, what sort of treatment did you actually have?
So I ended up having 3 surgeries. So I had a lumpectomy. Then because of a small bit of Jewish heritage that I have, they decided to test me for the BRCA genes, the Angelina Jolie ones.
Yes.
Yeah, that came back negative. But they did a sentinel node biopsy. So they took out, I think, 3 or 4 of my lymph nodes. So that was the second surgery. And then, so the first surgery was in late November of 2012. The final surgery was the 1st of March, 2013. So it was quite a bit of time in between worrying and knowing that there was still some cancer in there.
Yeah.
And then I did 6 weeks of radiotherapy, but I got so badly burnt from it, I had to have a week off in between. And that was a whole other thing. And I never healed properly after any of my surgeries. So that was a big deal as well. So yeah, I managed to skip the chemotherapy, which is really good.
Yeah.
But the rest of it still wasn't fun.
Yeah.
As you can imagine.
So how many years did you have to have treatment for?
So I was on a tablet a day for a few years. but that had side effects as well. So the actual treatment was pretty much, the in-your-face treatment was the radiotherapy for 6 weeks, but then there was the medication for 5 years, and that wasn't fun. But then I ended up having another surgery that was related to it because the medication had caused changes in my uterus. So I ended up having a hysterectomy. So it was just like the gift that kept on giving.
Yeah. And it stopped giving?
I think it stopped giving, although you always worry that it's going to come back.
Yeah. So do you have regular breast checks now, or what do you?
So every year I have a mammogram and an ultrasound. Because I've got very dense breast tissue, I need to have the ultrasound as well because a mammogram might not necessarily pick it up.
Yeah.
Which is something that's worth knowing for women who've been told that they have dense breast tissue, that it's, important to make sure you're getting checked by the right people because it can
just
hide.
Answered my next question. My next question was what advice would you give women?
Yeah. So I would say if you've got a strong family history like I have, then you definitely need to be thinking about it more and thinking about possibly screening every year from 40. So while Breast Screen Victoria and Breast Screen Australia say screen from 50 to 74, particularly Aboriginal women should probably screen from 40 because we do get our cancers earlier than other people. And also because we tend to not live as long, we need to sort of get that screening done earlier so that we can hopefully get in front of it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you talked about that family history. Was that your mum or sisters or?
So it was on my mum's side. My mum actually died at 43 from leukemia 3 days after she was diagnosed. So that was pretty scary. But her birth mother she got diagnosed with breast cancer in her 70s. Her 2 half-sisters got diagnosed with breast cancer, one in her 50s and one in her 60s. And the auntie who brought up my mum, so her birth mother's sister adopted her, she actually passed away from breast cancer in her early 40s. So it was always on my radar. And then on my dad's side, there was a cousin who's a similar age to me who had it as well.
That's huge risk factors then, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what about your kids and nephews and nieces?
Yep. So everyone's sort of all over it and thinking about it. My daughter's 32 now, so she will start screening at 40.
Yeah.
She might start seeing a doctor from 38 because they say that for daughters, if their mum's had a diagnosis, they should screen. You can't actually screen as such, but they should see a doctor 10 years earlier than what their mother's diagnosis was. So she should probably start at 38. Yeah. And I've got a son as well, but he is actually my sister's son by birth.
Yeah.
So, but then I guess my sister has a similar risk to me, so therefore he probably does. So, and that's the other thing, men get breast cancer as well, and especially when there's family history like there is with us.
Yeah.
So it's something that the men in the family need to take seriously too.
And I don't think that's talked about enough, is it?
No, it's not. And I think 2% of breast cancers are in men.
Yeah.
So, and especially, if you're a man who has some obvious breast tissue, some men look like they need a bra, quite frankly. But anyway, definitely check it out and just, have a feel and see if there's any lumps or anything. I've met some men with breast cancer, and I think that it goes under the radar a little bit. So
you normally hear men with like testicle cancer or throat cancer or lung cancer. You don't very often hear about the men with the breast cancer.
No, and I wonder if maybe that's too because men are more embarrassed to say that that's the cancer that they've got, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah. So it's interesting. So men definitely do need to think about it. It is a small percentage, and that's why there's no screening program. Because it doesn't make sense to put people through testing if such a small number actually come back positive. Because the testing itself could be a problem. If you get x-rayed too many times, it's not good for you. So
now, as a person that survived cancer, is that one reason that you've been working at places like the Cancer Council and Peter Mac?
It absolutely is. So I was cleared of cancer in 2013, and at the end of 2013, I graduated as a mature age student with a Bachelor of Education. And I was having trouble getting a teaching job. I was doing lots of emergency teaching, but over those sort of 4 years, no one actually offered me a permanent job, which was pretty disheartening. And I started thinking, maybe there's another way that I want to go. And I had already started a breast cancer support group here in Sunbury. I was involved in helping with BCNA and Breast Screen Victoria. And I started thinking, I wonder how I can sort of meld all of this stuff together. And then I saw an ad for an Aboriginal liaison officer in prevention and in the screening department part of prevention at Cancer Council Victoria. And I went for it, and it was perfect because it was about educating the community and health workers and whatnot. So I got the education part covered, Aboriginal woman covered, cancer experience covered. So I got that job. And then after doing that for 4 years, I decided it was time to move on, and I moved across to Peter Mac just over 2 years ago. And my roles there are, I started off as just an Aboriginal support project officer, which is a really long title for a project officer, working on their reconciliation action plan. And then I thought I really miss mingling with community and helping people. So I worked my way into the role of Aboriginal Hospital Liaison Officer 1 day a week. And when the other liaison's away, I fill in for her. So I still get that community contact. And I still do the reconciliation action plan stuff and other stuff, but I get to work with patients as well, which is really rewarding. And especially when you're working with end-of-life patients, I find that to be a real honour, and trying to make sure that they've got all of their cultural needs met as well as their family. It's really important to think about their family too when someone's, going to be going to the dreaming soon.
And I think it takes a strong person to deal with people in palliative care and their family, because it is very highly emotional.
It is very emotional. And last year we did lose quite a few patients all within a short space of time. And the youngest one was someone in their early 20s, and that was really confronting. And it does take a toll. I'm not going to lie. Some people say I'm strong, but I'll go off and be crying in the Jillawa or something. You put on a front, and you go through, and then you sort of might come to a brick wall at some point and say, "Oh, hang on, I need a break from this for an hour, 2 hours, whatever." So it's good. I mean, we've got counselling available now if we need it. But yeah, I find that actually getting together with the other mob across the precinct hospitals, so Royal Melbourne, Royal Women's and Royal Children's once a month, is a really good time to talk about all of this stuff and just feel safe. Yeah.
So you've been working in the Aboriginal community for a while now. But one question I've got is, how do you define leadership in the Aboriginal community?
Oh, wow. Yeah, look, I actually think there are not enough people in leadership roles in hospitals in particular who are Aboriginal. So that's an issue itself. I find that even at Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations, there's still people who aren't Aboriginal in those leadership roles. And I feel that if we're going to have self-determination and really, be looking after ourselves and each other and doing it properly, we need people in those leadership positions. And I think that there needs to be more mentoring for that to occur. Yeah.
You're also involved in Sunbury Aboriginal Corporation too? Yep,
I'm back on the board now. I got off the board last November to let some other people, let some new blood in.
Yep.
But a couple of people had to step down, and so I'm back there again. I was actually one of the founding members, so I was on the original board. Yep. Helped Gail Radford set that up. that was pretty cool. Now we're finally in our own building. Well, in our own building, I say it's the old courthouse in Sunbury that we're leasing off the council, but it's nice to have a space where we can host programs and art sessions, and we had a Mother's Day high tea, and yeah, it's really good to have that space.
So tell us a little bit about the need for the Sunbury Aboriginal Corporation when you're trying to set it up in Sunbury, because you said you helped Gail do it, but what prompted you to actually do it?
So Gail was working as an engagement officer with Sunbury Community Health at the time, and reaching out to Aboriginal community, and that's when I started to really get involved in community and realising that there were quite a lot of Aboriginal people in Sunbury, but that health needs weren't being met necessarily, certainly not in Sunbury, because there's no Aboriginal health service in Sunbury. So she worked to get us involved in Sunbury Community Health, and to get them to be asking the question of identity, and then offering people sort of, easier ways to get in to services and things. Priorities, prioritised for dental health. She went to a local optometrist, and any Aboriginal person can go to them, and for $10 they can get a pair of glasses, that sort of thing. So there was definitely a need, but there was nowhere central to sort of do any of it. And our dream going forward is to actually have a health service, even if it's not a full-time one. Yeah. Because it's a long way to go to VARS, even though there's a VARS now in St Albans, I think, or there's going to be soon. It's a long way to go from Sunbury. And there's nothing sort of in between Sunbury and VARS in Fitzroy, pretty much, or out to Epping or Thomastown or somewhere. So, that's our long-term dream. But we are hoping to have some child psychology sessions and things running through Sunbury Aboriginal Corporation soon, which will be really good. And as there's a need for things, we'll sort of try and find people who can service those needs.
Yeah.
And we've only just got a few months, maybe 6 months ago, we've now got an executive officer. So we're building up. When we started the organisation, there were no staff.
Yeah.
We've now got 2 staff members. So we'll build. Yeah.
Have you guys been modelling yourself on any other particular gathering place service?
Not really, because we feel like we've got different needs in Sunbury to a lot of other places. It's a different demographic. When Gail looked into it, a lot of members of Sunbury Aboriginal Corporation are actually people working in the city and living in Sunbury, and people working full time, which would be a slightly different demographic to, say, Broadmeadows or other areas of Hume, which is our local council. So we need to have more after hours things available, because through the day there's not as many Aboriginal people in Sunbury. We have just become the biggest Aboriginal population in Hume.
Oh, wow.
So it used to be, I think it was Craigieburn, but now it's Sunbury.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Do you know what the numbers are?
No, but I don't. I think it was like around 300 or something, which is, it's still a fair number. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are now, but yeah, we've grown, which is really good. Yeah.
Do you have any Aboriginal role models that you look up to?
Auntie Pam Pedersen.
Yeah.
I love Auntie Pam. You, AJ, let me just say, you were my mentor for a while. It was fantastic.
I kind of missed that a little bit, but I'm still your mentor anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Just not officially.
Yeah.
Not a paid mentor. Yeah, look, there's a few people around. There's a few, I certainly would never mention any names, but there are people who I would say, no, I definitely don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, like with anyone and anything, there's always people you just go, yep, wouldn't be doing that. Yeah. So there's a few, but I would say Auntie Pam is my number one.
Yeah. Now, Auntie Pam she's involved in Peter Mac as well, isn't she?
She is. So she's a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Advisory Committee. I'd met her previously through Breast Cancer Network Australia because she also had a breast cancer diagnosis, and she wouldn't mind me saying that. Yeah. So we run into each other at breast cancer events as well. But yeah, we've become good friends through Peter Mac, which is fantastic. But she's everywhere like that. I don't think I could ever have as much energy as she does. She just turned 80 last week. Yeah. And she's still running half marathons.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know. Every time I see her, I go, she's not slowing down at all.
She's not. I said to her recently, Aunt, I feel like if you ever slow down, your body will just go, oh yeah, I like this, and you'll never get up again. She'll become a couch potato.
Question I was going to ask you is, when you're at school, if you can remember that far back.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out how old I am. Yep.
How much Aboriginal studies did you learn at school?
So primary school, I can tell you what I learnt was there were boomerangs, and somehow or other koalas came into it. That's all I remember. There was nothing else, but Captain Cook, he was a fine and dandy man. At high school, I don't remember learning anything. I didn't get a really good education about it until I was at university, and I did an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education unit, and that was a real eye-opener because even as Aboriginal people, you don't know everything about everything that's happened. So yeah, that was interesting.
Do you think it's changed over time? Like, did your kids, and you've got grandkids as well, the grandkids at school, they go to school? Yeah, 2 of them are at school, and they do an acknowledgement of country at school. They learn a lot. They're passionate about stuff. They will come to me and tell me things that they've learned, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's really good. And my youngest granddaughter, who's about to turn 14 months, I've got a picture of her for Sorry Day doing some art that they did at her daycare group. Oh, so yeah, so I thought that's really good. That's really immersing them in stuff. And I believe that their daycare centre gets elders in and does things now and then, and they have Aboriginal storybooks, and they just have lots of stuff. So that's really, really good. What's reconciliation mean to you?
Oh, wow. It's a big one, isn't it? I think for me, it's about people who are not mob acknowledging that stuff happened and like really owning it, even though like it's not their fault, but they still are part of the institutions that carry on some of these things. Acknowledging it and trying to work out how to move forward. So it's like with our reconciliation action plan, it's about making sure that places are culturally safe, making sure that cultural needs are met, and giving Aboriginal people opportunities to really shine. It's like Peter Mac recently awarded a contract for the new uniforms for the whole organisation. That's 3,600 people to Thread Group, who are an Aboriginal uniform supplier. So that is really cool. And that came partly out of the Reconciliation Action Plan because they linked in with Kinaway and Supply Nation and found these people, and it's just incredible. And they really were the best tender. They saved the business $15,000 or something, I think, So, yeah. So you've got to give opportunities.
Yeah. I was saying today to a couple of a group that I was with, that they asked me today, what does reconciliation mean to you? And I was saying, I think reconciliation to me is about, again, non-Indigenous people stopping and actually going, before you reconcile with Aboriginal people, you need to reconcile what does Aboriginal history mean to you?
Yeah.
Where how recent is this history? How can I make changes to the way that I do things? And that might have to be involving the unlearning of things, in the relearning of things, and wanting to learn more. And
absolutely,
that's what I was trying to get. Before you can reconcile with other people, you need to kind of reconcile it with yourself.
absolutely. And I think it's not about just whacking an acknowledgement of country at the beginning of every meeting and just reading it from a thing and not actually meaning what you're saying. And, you know, I'm really passionate about people adding their own words to an acknowledgement of country and saying what it really means to them, and acknowledging that sovereignty was never ceded.
How do you feel about non-Indigenous people reading the acknowledgement at you?
Yeah, look, for some people it's because they're nervous and they don't know what to say, and I always give them a free pass the first or second time, but then I'm like, you need to add some other bits to it. But yeah, when you know that someone's just doing it because they have to, then please don't even do it.
Yeah,
that's the way I feel about it. There's no point saying it if it's not from the heart.
because then it sounds just like a bit tokenistic or like a checkbox.
Absolutely. It's also like it can be overdone too when you're at an event and every speaker that gets up says it. And if they all just say it the very most basic way, then it's like, well, you're not saying it because it means something to you necessarily. You're saying it because you feel like, well, everyone else did it, I better do it.
What are some things you would like to see changed in Aboriginal areas around employment, education, health?
Yeah. I think that people need to just be more open to looking at Aboriginal ways of being and doing things, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions. I think, there's a lot of things like people might look at me and say, well, you're not very Aboriginal. I think there needs to be more work around the fact that Aboriginal people don't look the same. Yeah. Like, you're not black enough, or that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of work to be done around that. I really do have concerns about lateral violence, about how some Aboriginal people treat other Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
I've faced that, and it's not fun. And it just breaks my heart. We should be bringing each other up, not putting each other down. Got to lift, It doesn't take anything away from you to give to someone else.
Do you find the lateral violence getting worse, or it comes in?
I think it depends. Depends where you are in the context, really. So, but I do find it in different areas. Like it could just happen at an event where you're just someone at an event and someone else says something and tries to bring you down. It happens, in workplaces. It hasn't happened in mine, thankfully. Yeah. We're very supportive of each other. But it happens out in community, and I wonder if it's about people actually not feeling as secure as they're making out that they do. Yeah. And so they're putting that onto someone else to give themselves some sort of, I don't know, joy or peace or something.
Have you noticed, or do you feel that racism is getting worse or better in Australia?
So interestingly, I think that younger generations are doing it better. Yeah. But you'll always get pockets of, groups where it's not as good. And it depends on what people are being taught. What are parents modelling at home? What are grandparents modelling? When I was teaching, if a kid said something that was a bit racist or whatever, you could just about put your money on it that their parents actually say those same things at home. And so the kids are modeling that, and even when you're trying to tell them a different way, if they're hearing it constantly at home, they're more likely to go with what their parents say than what their teachers say. So I think that it's a real responsibility that parents don't necessarily think about. Parents and just other people who care for children, basically. Think about what you're saying. It's like the people who, at the footy, where you start yelling and screaming and swearing at football players, and then your kid does and you tell them off. You go, well, you were doing it.
Yeah.
You can't tell them off for it if you were just doing it. Yeah.
I know that we as black fellas, we shouldn't be reading social media comments on.
Oh, that's quite a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Yeah. We've had a few incidents so far this year with like Jamara Ugle-Hagan, for example, and recently Arnie Joy and comments, and I couldn't believe how much vile comments were actually going out with people that say I'm not racist, but.
Oh, that old I'm not racist, but oh goodness me. Yeah. I'm not anti-gay, but I'm not whatever. I'm not xenophobic, but you know that it's not going to end well when someone starts off a sentence with that.
No.
Yeah. No, it's just really sad, and I really felt for Jamara, and I'm a Bulldogs supporter, so
That's why I thought I'd bring that one up there.
Yeah, good job. Nice segue there. Yeah. It's pretty shocking. I feel like sometimes people maybe do it. There's the keyboard warriors, for starters. No one really knows who they are, so they say whatever they like, and whether or not they believe it. And then perhaps at the footy, depending on who you're around, if other people are mouthing off, then you might be the loudest one that's heard. Yeah. And maybe you don't necessarily feel that way, but you did it. I feel like if someone can be brave enough to call it out, even just to say, like, you don't have to make a big deal of something, just to say, hey, mate, actually, that doesn't sound right. Or, there's kids listening, or, just pull people up on it. It doesn't have to be too confrontational. You just, need to say something.
Do you think the racial comments in the football is getting worse? Or do you think it's all now?
I will say that when I've been to the footy, I've never heard anything, so that's a good thing. I don't know if it's getting worse. I just think that it's being called out a little bit more. There might be a few more people around who are willing to point the finger and say to security, hey, that person is actually the one that said that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's the way that we're going, and more people are calling it out. I don't know. I feel like it's always going to be there. But there's always going to be someone who's going to be an idiot. But hopefully most of the population are going towards being more tolerant and inclusive and all of those wonderful things.
What do you think the future should be like? If I said to you, in 50 years' time, where would you like to see Aboriginal affairs or Aboriginal health in 50 years' time?
I'd like to see that we didn't need closing the gap anymore, that there was sort of parity, that we had the same outcomes as everyone else, health-wise, that we had the same level of number of people, percentage finishing school and going on to university or a trade or whatever. I'd like to think that Aboriginal businesses were appreciated and didn't have to put up with stuff. I would hope that people like the beautiful Arnie Joy didn't have to put up with the things that she's had to put up with recently, that people like Jamara no longer have to be, have to go away feeling bad because someone said something that's just really rude. I'd like to think that maybe we'll get to a point where Aboriginal culture is actually really appreciated and and celebrated. You know, we're the longest continuous culture in the world. That's something to be proud of. That's something that everyone in Australia should be proud of. I'd like to see that happen. I think we've got a long way to go. But I think that hopefully we'll get there. Probably not in my lifetime.
I was about to ask that. Do you think it would be in your lifetime? That was my next question.
No, I'm about to turn 59. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I like to think that maybe in my grandkids' lifetime.
I think that what a lot of people don't realise is that, 54% of our Aboriginal population is actually under the age of 25.
I know, it's incredible.
So if we're talking about 50 years, we really are talking about that group under the age of 25.
Yep.
Because in 50 years or 40 years, we want them to be 65 and above.
Yep.
With those gaps closed.
And hopefully their peers are more supportive and appreciative, and just, it shouldn't matter what colour you are. There's a lot more acceptance of LGBTIQ people now, which is great, but there are still plenty of people who don't accept it and are hateful. But I like to feel that generally that's moving in the right direction, and I would like to see the same thing happen for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, for Muslims, for people from every country, that we are all just people and not a colour or a race.
Yeah. Because you work in health, I want to ask you this question. Do you still find that many health professionals don't actually know why we're actually asking that question? Do you identify as being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. And we have this wonderful person who comes along and does some training about asking the question, and leaves the trainees in tears because they didn't realise just the impact that the history, the very recent history too, has had on people, and about why you need to ask the question of identity, how you need to ask it, why is that so important, and what supports can then be given if someone does identify, and not about, like people I've had it, are you Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? Because they're expecting you to say no, and you say yes, and they go, you sure? Or which part of your love? Your earlobe? Yeah. It's really rude.
I can tell your nose is, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can see it a bit in your nose now. Yeah. But you're very pale, aren't you? Yeah. So
I'm laughing about that, but that's exactly what we get.
Exactly. But we can laugh about it. Other people shouldn't laugh about it, but we have to laugh about it. Because but it is what we get. It is absolutely what we get, and it's just wrong. And we also need to be making sure that everyone knows. I was speaking about this today at a hospital. Everyone knows that it doesn't matter what someone looks like or sounds like or where they were born. You still got to ask if they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, because, I know of people who have Chinese heritage as well, and so that person is Aboriginal and also Chinese, and so they look Asian, so they don't get asked.
Yeah.
Or, I had a client once who had an American accent, was brought up in America, but was born here and, of Aboriginal descent. And so if people didn't ask her because of her accent, that would be wrong too.
Yeah. And I've known some Aboriginal friends who've gone overseas and had a couple of kids. And the kids have come back, and because they say they're born overseas, they're not asked either. Exactly.
Yep. And I've run into a few people recently who, they were born, many generations of them were born in New Zealand, and, they're Māori people, but they also have discovered that they're Palawa from Tasmania, because back in the day, the women were taken to New Zealand and married off.
Yeah.
And so if you heard them speaking and saying they were born in New Zealand, you might not ask. Well, you'd be dead wrong.
Mm. A question I was going to ask you, if someone's looking to find out more about their Aboriginality, where would you suggest they start?
I would say Koori Heritage Trust is good. So I've heard. Link up. But I think if you have an inkling as to where you're from, trying to find some people in that community and just have a yarn, because not everything's written down on paper. And sometimes there were people who had affairs or things, and babies who were born out of wedlock and not accepted by either community. They weren't accepted as Aboriginal back in the day. They also weren't accepted as white people. And so, people who were in limbo, and so all of the history's gone until you can find someone who's had an aunt who told them about such and such or whatever. There's many different ways to go about it. Yeah, it's tricky. It's really hard, though. It can be really hard.
Because part of working at Sunbury as well, and I think what people don't always get is that a lot of gathering places are established for people that are a bit lost and not connected.
Yep.
So you would see many people at Sunbury that know that they're Aboriginal but don't know much about their Aboriginality.
Absolutely. Yep. And myself, my dad and his siblings, look, I have to say that I think that they always knew, but nothing was ever mentioned. But we all, as kids, I can remember at Christmas time, the whole big family would get together. My dad's one of 7, and all the other cousins and I would laugh. We thought it was hilarious that Granddad was Aboriginal. We didn't get that made us Aboriginal, and we didn't know why we thought it was so funny. But, he was clearly an Aboriginal man, but no one was talking about it. So, it wasn't until I was older and I had my kids and I thought, no, we need to find out some more about this. And I started ticking, yes, we are, and identifying that way. But even then, I still didn't feel comfortable saying to another Aboriginal person that I was Aboriginal. I was saying, I'm part Aboriginal. I got told off for that. You're not part Aboriginal. You're either Aboriginal or you're not, lady. Yeah. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe I can say I'm Aboriginal. Yeah. And I feel that there's a lot of other people. I've come across people in my work who will say, well, yeah, I am Aboriginal, like very quietly, usually I am Aboriginal, but I haven't got all the history. And so I'm kind of part Aboriginal. And then I did have a family where the patient was identifying, but their siblings were with them and they go, no, we're not. And then upon talking to them for a bit longer, it's like, yes, we actually are. But, it's tricky. And I think it comes from some of that shame from previous generations and also from the fact that it was easier if you didn't look particularly Aboriginal. It was easier to grow up as a white person or perhaps a Greek person or an Italian person, because some people do look a little bit like they could be Greek or Italian too. So it was easier to be, which is really sad, isn't it? It was easier to be a Greek or Italian person than an Aboriginal person.
Yeah. I always see in the future, I hope that people aren't ashamed to acknowledge their Aboriginality. But again, that history is still so raw for some people.
Yeah, that's right. I have to say that my kids are quite happy to acknowledge it. Like my son, so much so that he's the manager of an Aboriginal health unit. So he's out there doing some deadly stuff. Yeah. So that's really cool.
What does your daughter do?
She's a lawyer with a government organisation. Yeah. She's part of the Aboriginal network at her work. Yeah. And, loud and proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you go look back on your life a little bit and go, there were times where maybe I could have explored my Aboriginality but never did, or you really had to wait until you?
I think I never felt that I would be accepted, and so I did. So when I first started working at the tax office many years ago in my early 20s, there was a woman there who was she was employed as part of a program where they employed a certain percentage of Aboriginal people. And she had a flag on her desk and she was proud and whatever. And I went up to her one day and I said, oh, this is really cool. I said, did you know I'm actually part Aboriginal? And she looked at me and basically told me to go away. So I was like, okay, so maybe this isn't a thing. Maybe I don't get to say that I'm Aboriginal. And it wasn't until years later when I met some aunties and that who were very much accepting and whatever. And I finally felt like I was in the right place. I felt like I'd found my people.
Yeah.
It made a big difference.
Do you ever know what happened to that woman at the tax office?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
It was just a bit mean, really. But anyway, I wish her well, nonetheless.
I know. It's I know I'm just watching the time, but I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions.
Yep.
One is, where do you see, or has there been more research in Aboriginal people with cancer in terms of ways to actually effectively work with Aboriginal people?
So I don't know if you know about it yet, but VATCO, the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, quite the mouthful there, have just released last Wednesday. They launched their cancer journey strategy.
Okay, yeah.
Which is brilliant. It's a brilliant document. It's, first and foremost about self-determination, ways that hospitals should be dealing when working with Aboriginal people, best practice, all that sort of thing about having a space in a hospital that is for Aboriginal people to chill out or whatever, about being culturally safe. I haven't read the whole document yet because it's, I've been a busy girl this week. But it is brilliant and you can find it online if that interests anyone. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a really good blueprint, but also the cultural safety stuff that comes from the health department in Victoria has some quite comprehensive stuff as well, which is, it's really good framework for how to do things. It's just getting people to do it.
What message would you want to give people tonight about what we've been talking about today?
So I would say, first and foremost, doesn't matter what colour you are, if you're Aboriginal, be proud and don't let the naysayers say, well, no, you're not, because clearly they've got their own issues and you identify the way you want to identify because you are you. I would say be proactive with your health and get all of your health checks, says the woman who hasn't had her Aboriginal health check for a little bit. But anyway, get your health checks, do all of your screening when the time comes. Do all your screening when you have the opportunity. If you're a woman, start breast screening from 40 if you can. And don't be ashamed to go to the doctor if you feel that something isn't quite right. Don't be brave. Do it for you, but do it for your family, do it for your community, because we want you to be around for a lot longer.
Cool. Look, I want to say thank you for hanging with me this evening. I always love talking to you, but I'll let our viewers know, I do know that you're a bit of a Days of Our Lives fan.
I could be, yes. I might be like completely up to date now, yes.
Yeah, I know that you're a bit of a Days of Our Lives fan.
Yeah. Sad but true.
Any other secret you'd like our viewers to know before you go?
Oh, I like Nickelback.
Oh, you like Nickelback? Oh,
yeah, that's a big one. That really, and I don't like Coriander. So, like, they're fairly divisive things. You're either on one side of the fence or the other. There's no middle ground with Coriander or Nickelback, I've found.
Yeah. I think Days of Our Lives works the same way.
I think you could be right there too. I did give it up for many years.
Yeah.
But,
Nickelback, Coriander or Days of Our Lives?
Oh, Days of Our Lives. I mean, Coriander's never been a thing. But, I did give it up for a long time. And then I started having a yarn with you and it was COVID and I'm like, there's nothing else to do. I've got to get back into this. And now I'm right back there. I've been watching it since I was born, I think, or just about. I think it's
Sure
old.
you were able-
I'm
you're
older than it. No,
sure you were able to catch up from when you didn't watch it to the day you
I was. I mean, there were a few new characters, but they were still the same old people, and I'm very happy that Bo's back. Just saying.
Yeah. Who's
I
your
did
favourite
see him in
character?
person one day. I saw him at High Point a
Oh,
long
okay.
time ago.
Yeah. Who's your favourite character?
Kayla. And I named my daughter Kayla. Take what you will from that.
I would say my two favourite were Kayla and Anna.
Oh, Anna's hilarious.
Yeah.
Those one-liners. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've just dobbed myself in. People all know I watch Days of Our Lives now.
Well, look, they know I do too. So,
Yeah.
That's what we bonded over.
Yeah. I used to watch it for people, the viewers that don't know, doing nursing. I used to have lunch at 1 o'clock and either Bold and the Beautiful or Days of Our Lives was on in the tea room. So I got kind of addicted to it.
You can't help it.
I know. Sometimes it's better to listen to other people's problems than my own.
That's right. And look, it's so out there too. Like you just got, it's like it's make believe, and that's fine. Sometimes you just need a bit of stupid in your life.
Yeah. And I kind of agree, because I mean, when you really think about it, how many family members do you know who come back from the dead?
That's right. And none of my family members that I know of have been possessed once, let alone twice.
Yeah. And I've never had a wedding interrupted by an ex-spouse that's turned up.
It's crazy, isn't it? No one came and took me away on my wedding day on a motorbike. You know?
I know. Well, guys, I'm going to say goodbye to the lovely Andrea Casey. And guys, I'll see you at the next podcast. See you later. Bye.
Bye.